We are the knights who say, after combat damage, trigger Exsanguinator Cavalry for each one of my knights. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, and today something snazzy has asked me to play around with Exsanguinator Cavalry some more, and test their Mono Black Knights deck list. So, Exsanguinator Cavalry is a card that is the right power level for Legacy. It's probably not going to be the backbone of a tier 1 deck or anything like that, but if you find yourself in the Dark Ritual and or Ancient Tomb shell, this is a card that you'll probably want to consider from this point forward. It is a scaling threat. Multiple copies of Exsanguinator Cavalry will trigger different times. You can kind of like use them to scale each other, and it's pretty cool. And a lot of times your Ancient Tomb deck lists don't end up with cantrips or any real sort of selection, so it's not like the blood tokens are dead either. And one of my jobs as someone who plays a lot of brews, some good, some bad, is to kind of push some of these cards to their limits and see which things are worth exploring and which things aren't. So today we're going to be playing with probably more copies of Knights than we should. And Ayara's Oathsworn is something that was suggested quite a few times on my last Exsanguinator Cavalry video. It's a 2-2 with Menace, and like, evasion is good in Legacy right now. Really good in Legacy right now. See Stalactite, Stalker, Murktide, Regent, Grief, etc. So when it deals combat damage to a player, if it has fewer than 4 +1/+1 counters, put a counter on it. And then if it has exactly 4 counters, you get 2 Demonic Tutor, which is pretty cool. Now, like, let's temper expectations here. If you hit with Ayara's or Oathsworn 4 times, you've done 2 + 3, 5, + 4, 9, + 5, 14 points of damage just with this creature. So, like, kind of keep that in mind. But if you do control an Exsanguinator Cavalry, you can scale this up quicker than just that, making the Demonic Tutor into a relevant card. And let's not forget that games of Legacy sometimes kind of devolve into this like Uro hell against matchups like Sultai Beans or 4 or 5 color beans. So the tutor mode could be relevant, but is unlikely to be relevant. We're playing this as another redundant scaling threat. So this is the deck list that I was sent with some very, very, very minor adjustments. I was sent a 64 card main deck, and I was told, pick one of Thoughtseize or Dark Ritual. I don't know which one to play. My thought is that if we're in a deck that is playing some top end that looks like maybe Sholdred or an initiative creature, Dark Ritual is absolutely going to be necessary. But if we are going to try to intentionally play more 1-drop Knights, wink wink, nudge nudge, Changelings, then I think we can get away without Dark Ritual. I mean, we may find very early on that this is not in fact the case, but my experience with online leagues right now is that they're fast as fuck, boys. Like, seriously, folks. With sticker goblin decks out there, I've seen a decent amount of combo online, some storm, some all spells. Like, people are trying to race that deck. So I am going to opt to try Thoughtseize in the main deck today, rather than go and try to just play more mana. We do have like a couple of mana sinks in the deck. Like, it is not embarrassing to just sink mana into Knight of the Ebon Legion if you're kind of low on resources or you need to kind of make combat blocking awkward for your opponent. Holding this deck together, we are going to have the Grief Reanimate Troll of Khazad-dum shell that we've seen so many times from the mono black decks, and Orcish Bowmasters, which is currently, sitting at about 40% of the metagame. A scary number as far as a card that's not like Brainstorm, Ponder, Wasteland goes, but I personally am of the opinion that at this time, the Bowmaster play patterns are absolutely fine and healthy for Legacy, despite the preposterous numbers of decks that Orcish Bowmasters is actually in. Kind of moving the sideboard around to visualize it in a different way. The left-hand column is the things that are essentially here for combo decks, with Pithing Needle kind of overlapping with the fair column, and the right column is things that I have for fair matchups. I didn't really make too many changes here. I did add Dismember. I'm not sure if this deck wants to be playing like Dismember or Snuff Out. I think it needs something to specifically answer initiative creatures and sticker goblins. And Dismember is a better fair card that I can bring in when that is appropriate. Snuff Out is better against the cards that I listed exactly, but playing a Snuff Out in an Ancient Tomb deck that's also a Thoughtseize deck is like definitely sus, especially if I want to use my Ancient Tomb mana as mana sinks for night or maybe to like loot through blood tokens. So that's why I landed on the Dismember, which can be paid for life, but doesn't have to be as that game drags on. Like, Dismember is more flexible, and a lot of times 4 mana for a late game Snuff Out is sus. So yeah, this one's definitely gonna be an experiment. Hopefully it does well and we do the thing. About the only other thing that I thought of was that I think it's possible to rebuild this deck to be an Urza Saga deck as a secondary thing. Like, you cut City of Traders, you play 4 Urza Sagas in those slots, and then you slot in a couple of Retrofitter Foundries as a way to sacrifice Changeling Outcast, and then that also gives you another mana sink. But I think the core idea is solid enough here and, like, focused enough that this is going to be competitive in a Legacy League. And if you like what you see today and you need to buy any of it, consider checking out my sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc., and use promo code to save 5% on your next order. They've treated me well. They even sent me a little New Year's card, which I thought was very cute. So let's battle. All right, I've kept my opener here. I think conceptually I'm looking to go, oh my god, this art is gorgeous. I'm looking to go turn 1 Ayara's Oathsworn into turn 2 Exsanguinator Cavalry. I think that's my plan. Chalice of the Void is not going to do much against this hand. I mean, we drew another 1-drop, which is ever so slightly unfortunate, but hopefully we'll just end up looting through with blood tokens. I'm thinking about whether or not I need to play the Life Flinker just on turn 1 to recoup losses. This is going to be better versus Rabblemaster. I'm just thinking about, like, the counters on this. I think the counters on this might be relevant to end up getting me a removal spell. This may be a mistake. We're in slightly weird brewer town. Me and my smoothie. We're going to figure this out together. It's pretty delicious. Slightly bitter. Too much matcha powder this time. An Urza's Saga. That's going to be good. And now we have to figure out what color my opponent is. Black wouldn't surprise me. Hey. Black market connections. I have said to my opponent, I see you also have good taste. A Chromox. I think I'm just going to loot away one of my 1-drops this turn. I'm going to go ahead and play my Exsanguinator Cavalry. We're going to crash in for 2. Now we get 2 triggers here. I get to scale up my creature twice, make a blood token, and I think we'll start by discarding a 1-drop here. We drew another 1-drop. That's not the best. So next turn, I can, in theory, just tutor with this. I just have to stack the triggers so the Ayara's trigger goes on bottom. And my opponent, I guess my opponent could theoretically have 2 creatures if they go deep on the life loss here. We'll see what they do with black market connections. Treasure, card, token. Yeah, they went deep. They can pay 2 life, go to 6 to make an Urza Saga token. Got it. So the Urza Saga token is what? A 1, 2, 3 is a 4/4. So if I attack with Ayara's, I trade with the Urza Saga token and connect for 2? That's not bad. This Chalice is, like, better against me than I thought it would be. I think I have to attack, because I think if my opponent pulls a Shadow Spear out of their deck, things just kind of get bad for me. But both my creatures having Menace here makes combat quite good. So let's take out this construct. Alright, so now I get to scale this up and make my blood token. And we're going to continue to loot through 1-drops here, unfortunately. Fuck. Not quite going as planned. So this is only a 3/4 right now. So this second Urza's Saga token is, like, definitely going to be a problem. So here's another 4/4. That becomes a 5/5 after the search. And called that one. Oh, went to 2. So there's a treasure token equip. They can immediately attack me for 4 to regain that life. And then if they want, they can pay with Ancient Tomb to move it to the construct token. They do not want. Unfortunately, we drew a lot of 1-drops, and Moxen, this attack isn't good anymore. And I think at this point, Black Market Connections plus Shadow Spear on a construct token buries me. And Edicts don't get us out of this spot. That's unfortunate. So we have 16 1-drops. So, like, I did have plenty of things I could have drawn with a higher CMC. But that did not happen. So I don't mind my 4 removal spells. The Null Rod and Pithing Needle things are definitely going to have some impact. I'm not the best versus Urza Saga. Plague Engineer is a little mid as well. I think I have to just shave some number of 1-drops. I think that means Thoughtseize. I think Thoughtseize comes out for 4 removal spells, and there's just a question of, like, how much do I want to hedge against Shadow Spear specifically? It is a card that's going to beat me pretty hard. I don't have traditional tutors for them, such as Urza Saga. I can technically tutor in this deck. It's not going to happen a lot. I think a lot of the time my knights get bogged down. I'm going to try playing the deck like this for a game 2 where I'm on the play, and when I'm on the draw, I'm going to board out a couple of knights for... Holy fuck. Okay. I think I'm going to board out a couple of knights for ways to stop Shadow Spear. So I think we're just playing Menace Duder into Menace Duder, and hoping that Hot Sword Lady can get there. I really like this art. All right. Imprint 1 and cast 1. And has just a touch too much mana. Like any one other card here, and this hand is pretty ideal. Because if I have one more black card, I just get to play turn 1 Ayara's Oathsworn into turn 2 double Ayara's Oathsworn, which is still a thing that could happen if I just happen to rip the 4th one off the top. Or like a Bowmasters could give me another aggressive early line as well. Alright. It seems like my opponent has an Orcish Bowmasters. It's still an even trade, because my opponent has to double block. But we did not want Chrome Mox off the top. You're not supposed to ping that. You're supposed to send that at face, because you already have to double block, and I'm killing both of these in combat. And you can't ever single block. So, that is just an objective misplay. And now I am reliant on the top of my deck to produce something. Like a Grief or a Troll off the top is really, really good. Black Market Connections. Urborg notably helps make my Ancient Tombs better. Fuck, okay. Where is my companion? I require my companion. I think we're gonna get buried. I think we kept a reasonable but slightly mana-heavy hand, and then just got punished by the top of our deck just being mana cards. I'm glad we don't have Dark Ritual in this deck. That's for sure. Fuck. Okay. Double fuck. Okay. GG. Reanimate on Orcish Bowmasters. Not doing a ton right now. If I can reanimate Sholdred after drawing a kill spell, that's not bad. Still don't really know that that's enough. I'm going to take one more draw, and then if I miss, I'm just going to concede. So in, like, classic Magic theory terms, my opponent's deck is just a slightly bigger version of my deck, and in a mirror situation, the person who is slightly bigger often ends up being favored as you have similar resources, but one of you just has more haymakers to kind of put you over the top. Reanimate is now shut off as an out, and I believe that I'm willing to concede. This is a Shouldered from Hell. Sent to kill me. I'll take one more draw step. But this Shadow Spear, though. Alright, we drew more mana. I will tip my hat to you, Larry David Yo. GG's. Cool deck.
Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, which is an absolutely awesome place to keep all of your deck lists. I keep all of my personal deck lists there as well, in addition to all of the stuff that I do for the stream. And in the future, they're going to have a social media site on here too. So if you're worried about other certain websites dying, maybe join Moxfield, put your deck lists up there, and in the future, you'll be there for social media stuff too.
All right. This opening hand is pretty sweet. I just get to play a knight into a knight plus an Orcish Bowmasters? Or like a knight into knight. Or sorry, I don't have double black mana plus ancient 2 mana. JK. I get to play a knight into other reasonable cards. Okay, we're Mox Opal? Oh, okay. So when I saw that tapped land, my first thought was that my opponent was going to be playing a Cascade deck. And then the Mox Opal instead told me that my opponent is probably playing like a draw 7 like wheel deck with Hull Breacher. So that means that resolving an Orcish Bowmasters is a really big deal. I think I'm going to just try to resolve that at sorcery speed before my opponent has another draw at a piece of counter magic. And if it doesn't resolve, then I get to reanimate it next turn. So the hope here is that my opponent cannot combo off this specific turn. After this turn, I can have like Sudden Edict available. This is fine so far. Oh, it's the One Ring. This is okay. It is very good. So Hull Breacher is potentially available. I'm not attacking this turn anyway. The plan is reanimate Bowmasters with one of my mana and hold up Sudden Edict beyond that, I suppose? Got it. Reanimate target Bowmasters. Now, I can't send this target at my opponent's face. That doesn't work. We'll send this... I'm going to send this at my own face rather than Knight of the Ebon Legion in case my opponent is playing a Black Splash for Orcish Bowmasters. I guess if they're playing Bowmasters, they just kill my Bowmasters instead. JK, I've talked myself out of that. And then I'm going to hold up Sudden Edict and pass the turn rather than play out another Knight. I miss out on a little bit of damage, but the easiest way for me to lose this game is this getting removed into, like, Hull Breacher plus a wheel. Alright. Opponent believes the only way out is through, and it's just going to draw their cards anyway. Which I respect. Like, you usually try to avoid casting your cantrips and such, but sometimes you can't. That's 5 mana. Or is it just going to be like 4 mana, and this is just like a Mystic Forge or something? Oh. The fuck is this gonna be? It's an adventure. Oh shit, it's Coveted Jewel. So my opponent gets to draw 3, and then they have like a recurring Black Lotus. And I can potentially steal this land. Bowmaster's coming in hot here. I think my opponent's dead on board at this point. This is going to be a 6 power thing. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. My opponent's dead on board. So they have to win this turn or produce a blocker or play a removal spell? Sure. So I think my initial read that they were a Wheels deck is slightly off. Oh, okay. You're gonna go into like an 8-drop and like Portal to Phyresis me or something? Oh, shit. Okay. This card is obviously broken and not an okay Magic card. At this point, it is possible that my opponent could just continue to play draw 3s and win, but this is a real problem. A Phyrexian Metamorph. That's gonna get to kill my Bowmaster. That is happening. I can't stop that. However, with this trigger on the stack, I can Sudden Edict them before anything else resolves. Just in case they do have wheels, so that they don't get to keep a Bowmaster as they wheel. Opponent's got 2 cards. 14, 15 mana. Fuck, it's a draw 3. Into a new 1 ring. At this point, I think I'm going to update you at relevant things, because my opponent's going to pop off here. And probably win. So a few spells later, we are legit on a copy of Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. Which is honestly pretty spicy. I'm not going to concede yet, because it's possible that my opponent could accidentally kill themselves with the 1 ring. They shouldn't. Like, they can just, like, play a new copy of the 1 ring to have one with no counters on it. But I think this is lights out. Alright, my opponent plays a couple of Spirit Guides. They're just going to take 5 from their 1 ring, and then attack me for lethal. I'm not going to make my opponent click through discarding all those cards at this point. I'll go ahead and concede. That was really cool. So the Null Rods in this sideboard are going to be good. What about Pithing Needle? Yeah, Pithing Needle for the 1 ring is good. Duress is fine. Mindbreak Trap's playable? I don't know if good, but probably playable. Sudden Edicts are not particularly strong here. That gets me the first 4 of these cards. I want 1 Mindbreak Trap from there. I probably just trim a 1-drop creature. I'll keep this one. It's a mana sink, and technically the +3/+3 might change the turns a little bit. Let's try this. So I can Duress to punch a hole. And then, like, the turn 2 is not actually all that good. Like, I can Duress into Swamp Cycle Troll, play 1-drop, or into just play Ayara's Oathsworn. But I don't know that 1 Duress is going to be enough to really stop my opponent. When I have, like, Null Rods in my deck, I think I'm supposed to mulligan a mid-hand. So this one's better, and it's better by a lot. So I'm always throwing back Swamp, and I'm always playing a turn 2 Exsanguinator Cavalry. The question here is, what do I pitch to the Grief to do my initial disruption? Do I pitch a Knight? Or do I just play a Knight on turn 1 and start scaling up immediately? And that's a tough one. This also gives me a mana sink for just if I rip poorly. I think I'm going to pitch an Exsanguinator Cavalry. And just play a creature on turn 1. Jeez. Okay. This is awkward. I think I have to take that Wormcoil Engine. I would love to reanimate that card. Like, love, love, love to reanimate that card. I don't love leaving my opponent with Manifold Key plus Grim Monolith. Especially when it's just going to fuel Urza's Saga. But my opponent's mana is actually kind of awkward. That helps a lot. Not this turn or anything, but in the future, that's real good. We think of Ancient Tomb in the face of Urza Saga. I probably play it. Like, this is a Menace lifelinker anyway. I think there's going to be scenarios where I want to continue to make land drops. It's possible this is wrong, though. We're looking to dodge a big, scary thing off the top of my opponent's library. Like, if my opponent just kind of, like, lucks into, like, a Paradox Engine or a One Ring this turn, it's pretty damn bad for me. But if we dodge for a turn or two, I think we're going to be okay. Lodestone Golem. That's okay. So I name Urza's Saga with this. And then my opponent's board is a lot less scary. This has Menace. I can pump my mana into Death Touch for this in this turn cycle. All right. Send them. No blocks. I think I am still into this. So let's give the +3/+3 and Death Touch and hit for 7. And then Exsanguinator Cavalry triggers twice, giving me these blood tokens. Now, in case you're not familiar with blood tokens, they are discard a card, sack this artifact as a part of the cost. So, I name Urza Saga to stop those construct tokens from coming in. And now, at my end step, I do get another +1/+1 counter at this since my opponent lost 4 or more life. I've got 4, 7, 10 incoming damage next turn. That's pretty good. Ooh. We have room for that utility. I don't know, maybe you're supposed to get rid of City of Traders there. Sure? Like, I think you get rid of City of Traders. Or sorry, I think you leave me with Ancient Tomb. Because, like, the life loss is definitely relevant. Especially if you have something like a Shadow Spear in your deck. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and attack for 7. My opponent's last card is Force of Will, which is not currently castable. Or not 1, 2. No, it is castable. It costs them this. I think costing them this mana is better than pumping damage into this. I'm just going to go ahead and send this. Trigger twice. We're going to Null Rod with 5 artifacts in play that have activated abilities. Nice. So this is a 2-for-1 in my favor. Like, I lose the Null Rod, it doesn't resolve. But my opponent loses this land and is also about to lose Urza's Saga as a mana source. So now it's just like, does my opponent have a Shadow Spear? That's a very important card here. It feels like conceptually my opponent's deck isn't going to have many creatures, though. So, yeah, I was hoping no. And that's an Ancient Tomb as their last card. I think we're good this game. I don't have lethal this turn. Oh, okay. They're just going to... I guess they can Manifold Key and untap it. Yeah, so they'll go to 1 after they block this. Yep. And we have 7 toughness on this. So this is okay. And now post-combat, I'm going to go ahead and loot. We'll discard this. Hell yeah. I hate showing my opponent that I have more than 1 copy of Null Rod, but they probably would have suspected that. And now we also get to scale this up one more time. All right, these knights are thick. Am a fan. Opponent's Ancient Tomb isn't even on anymore. So I know about Lodestone Golem now. And I know about Wormcoil Engine. Now my opponent has dudes. And if those dudes are coming in, maybe they are a little less all in on combo. Maybe I have to leave in a couple answers. My Thoughtseizes certainly get a little worse on the draw. But conversely, if I Thoughtseize my opponent and then reanimate a Wormcoil Engine or reanimate a Lodestone Golem, that's not bad. Like, Lodestone Golem as a 5 mana turn 1 play, or a 5 power turn 1 play is pretty legit. Let's play some Sudden Edicts and get rid of some Changeling Outcasts. I think since my opponent has shown me Force of Will and that, like, chump blocking could lead to some very scary things happening. I think I want Sudden Edict versus the slightly more flexible Children's Edict. I've got a tough one here that I'm thinking about. I can make a turn 2 6-power creature. I have much, much, much stronger hands in my deck. Do I want to keep this anyway? When I could just like mulligan and hit a Null Rod. I'm not sure that this is good enough on the draw. I think I would keep this on the play. I think I really... Oh, shit. Okay. The Chrome Mox is awkward here. And I'm going to go into depths why. So, if the Null Rod is Force of Willed, which is my opponent's primary out to Null Rod, then this Chrome Mox is incredibly important to my hand. And in every instance where the Null Rod resolves, this Chrome Mox is a dead card. That said, I believe that I am supposed to keep the Chrome Mox in this hand because it hedges against the worst possible thing that can happen to me. And if Null Rod resolves on my turn 1, I'm heavily favored to just win anyway. So I'm going to keep this and pitch the Reanimate that currently has no text. This is definitely awkward, but this is much, much stronger in the early game than the previous hand. And I think the early game is the most important part of this matchup in particular, as would be true in many, many, many matchups. All right. So no 4-mana play on turn 1. I mean, here's to hoping. I drew a Swamp, so I still have black mana if Null Rod does resolve. And it does. So now the scariest thing is an Urza's Saga. Not Urza's Saga. Fantastic. So we will play our life-linking threat and hope that we can get out of this before my opponent starts playing just 6-mana Wormcoil engines naturally, which could happen next turn. Got it. Bash in for 2. Scale up. Blood tokens are artifacts, so those are off for Null Rod purposes. Hopefully that's fine. Play Knight and pass. All right. That's a 6-mana Wormcoil engine. Wasteland is fine. That's close to irrelevant. Not totally irrelevant. So I am just going to create something larger than the Wormcoil engine. I am thinking about whether or not I want to just scale up Exsanguinator Cavalry this turn twice and let my opponent hit me for 6 once. I usually do, unless my opponent plays something like a Lodestone Golem on their next turn. So I think I'm into... Oh, this one's actually kind of tough. The Null Rod is hurting me a bit here. I think I'm into, on my opponent's turn, Sudden Edict their Wormcoil, and then I'll just reanimate it. I don't want to do it now, because then the tokens could potentially attack, so I'll wait till my opponent's turn. And because this has split second, I don't need to attack immediately. I can wait till my opponent puts something on the stack. Oh, it's big. It's not big. It is big. It is a Phyrexian Metamorph. Yeah, I'll Sudden Edict in response then. And make my opponent sacrifice the Wormcoil so they can't have 2 of them. They can make like another Death Touch token or whatever. So that's a lifelink one. This is a Death Touch one. Yeah, so they have 2 Death Touchers. Understood. So I'm always reanimating Wormcoil. And then the question is, like, am I just pumping into this so both my creatures can attack this turn? I think so. Because this can trade with the Death Toucher. My opponent can trade the other Death Toucher here, and then I just reanimate. I think I'm into that. Opponent's putting up a damn good fight for being null-rotted. Okay, let's confirm. So this is Death Touch. This is lifelink. I want to kill the Death Toucher. 2 life and 3 mana to turn this into a Death Toucher. Death Toucher. We'll clear the 2 Death Touchers out of the way and reanimate Wormcoil Engine. Which I guess is a little awkward if my opponent top decks another Phyrexian Metamorph. So maybe I'm supposed to just, like, reanimate this. It's really hard to say no to Wormcoil Engine, though. Wormcoil Engine, notably, is not a knight, unfortunately. Hopefully, you will forgive it. Alright, so opponent takes 6. Either one of these has Menace. Neither can block this. I think I'm interested in playing the Oathsworn here. I can scale this one up by 2 next turn, whereas I can only scale Exsanguinator Cavalry up by 1. There's a new land. Okay, so they're just going to swing at me to gain 3 life. That puts them to 9. They're not technically dead on board. So pre-combat, take 2 for Cavalry. Swing in for 8 of my opponent's 9 life. So Ancient Tomb is off. Ayara's Oathsworn scales up by 2. And my opponent needs a crazy draw that does not use Ancient Tomb, which is a pretty tall order. It needs to be some sort of like Phyrexian Metamorph copy Wormcoil Engine shenanigans or something like that. But with 3 menace creatures counting this one in my hand, like we'd probably get there anyway. All right, Worm Token crashes in, putting my opponent to 4. That turns Ancient Tomb back on. Let's do a pre-combat Thoughtseize. Just make sure that nothing weird is going to happen. Ooh. Ayara the Wormcoil. Well, that's super cool. Spirit Guide? Force of Negation. All right, take the Wormcoil. Go to combat. We have 6 damage available. Man, that almost like worked out for my opponent. I told my opponent their deck was sweet, and they were like, yeah, if only it could beat infinite copies of Null Rod on turn 1. Blah. GG's, that one was really fun. So I'm looking at a really weird opener. I can turn 1 Grief Pitch Troll, Chrome Mox Imprint Troll, play Ayara's Oathsworn. I'm going to chat with my opponent for a second. All right. I don't think this is going to cut it in this specific matchup. We are probably playing against Blue Dredge. That is the Otherworldly Gaze version. 1 Grief is cool and all, but I think I need to come out of the gates faster with like a Reanimate Troll hand. This is not great. I think I'm going to go deeper. Trying to get game 1 is really important. This is easily the best hand. So the question is, do I Grief Reanimate Grief or Grief Troll? So it's always 1, 2, 3, 4, and I get to keep 1 black card. Basically never willing to cast that. Unsure from here. I'm going to keep the Changeling Outcast as my pitch card for Grief. All right. Delta Pass. We found another Changeling Outcast. So I am always griefing pitching one of these. And then when we look at my opponent's hand, I can get a feel for whether or not I need to grief a second time. There's instances where the first grief might not even be good. So for example, in the hypothetical world where my opponent's hand is just full of dredgers, like this is super awkward. Here is an Otherworldly Gaze in response. So my opponent gets to choose whether or not they put cards into graveyard, and they hit a Troll as well as an Icarid. They are off to a great start. Careful Study and Brainstorm. So I can't reanimate this, right? So I reanimate it. It checks my... I could, like, Grief go to Graveyard? And then reanimate Golgari Grave Troll? Put a 1/1 into play? This feels like some crazy person shit. I think I'm going to try to kill my opponent and not do that. I'm going to take Brainstorm over Careful Study and then pass the turn. Like, I can take out this Troll, but between Otherworldly Gaze, Flashback, and Faithless Looting, I just don't think I'm going to stop my opponent from finding another Dredger. So I think creating a 6-power evasive creature is better. Only one Dredger in there. I'm going to cycle a Troll in response. Get a Swamp. My opponent probably names Reanimate. Could name like a Douthie Voidwalker. Yep, Reanimate is good. That's what I would have named first. And then they can sacrifice Narcomoeba if they want to take Changeling Outcast. And it's gone. So life is pretty bad. I expect to handily lose this game now. No Icarid returning. Bridge from below ×2. And just making sure you're familiar with some of the intricacies of this text. It's a non-token creature from the battlefield specifically. So it's not like cycling this troll can go and take my opponent's bridges out. +2 mace. I don't have one of those. Oh no. So Cephalid Coliseum has a threshold ability where you can draw 3 and discard 3, which is pretty good here. So notably, we learned that my opponent has Hogak in their deck. But they miss out on some Narcomoebas to do some dirty things to me immediately. I'm at 18. I've got a Grief. At this point, even just Icarid, Bridge, Cabal Therapy, Hogak is going to put my opponent over the top. We've lost game 1. It takes 2 to 3 turns for me to literally die, but I can't beat that board from there. So Plague Engineer is a weird one. You can put it on a creature type that Narcomoeba has to immediately kill Narcomoebas, but it's unclear whether or not that's actually a good thing, as if your opponent has Bridge from Below, it can be a very bad thing, and the same is true with Icarid. So, this is a little bit of a risky card. Singular removal spells are not particularly good in this matchup. Fairies are excellent. That's going to be the first thing that I bring in. Duress is okay. Pithing Needle has text. Plague Engineer has text. Orcish Bowmasters pinging something on my side to get rid of bridges is actively good. Knight gets walled a lot of times. So I will probably board out 2 Knights to get these cards in. Mindbreak Trap is kind of mid. Pithing Needle is kind of mid. I think I'm going to say no to Plague Engineer. So this is a turn 1 fairy hand that can produce a 6/5 on turn 2. Is it awkward? Absolutely. Am I keeping it? Absolutely. Alternatively, like sometimes I just play Exsanguinator Cavalry on turn 2 while I still have the 3 mana, and then I reanimate the following turn. Ooh. So my opponent is doing a classic dredge trick, which is when you're on the draw, you can just hard discard a Dredger. So I expect my opponent to like discard a Golgari Grave Troll or something here. Sure. Ancient Tomb's good. I think I just have to take out the initial Dredger. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out. Then I think I'm just reanimating. Like it's awkward mana-wise, but I think I need the clock here. And if my opponent does a pass the turn line again, I can just reanimate their Dredger out of their graveyard. Mana definitely a little awkward here. So I ship in for 6. Oh, you're just going to bounce it. Yeah, that's fine. That makes my turn a lot easier. Like, I just swamp cycle, get a new swamp, and immediately reanimate it. And then next turn, I can duress backed by a second creature. I am at 8 life, so things can get a little weird. It's awkward if my opponent leads on something like Careful Study and then follows it up immediately with a Brainstorm or other similar effect. But if they don't get that creature into the graveyard with the first card, it's definitely not the end of the world for me. I think I'm interested in first main phase Duress. There is a Stern Dismissal. All right, so my opponent has ley lines. My opponent has 2 lands. This is weird. I can put Otherworldly Gaze into their graveyard, but if I do, they can upkeep Otherworldly Gaze. And if I don't, I let them use it twice. So I think I'm just taking their Leyline of the Void, very awkwardly. All right. I'm going to play an Exsanguinator Cavalry. Actually, I guess they just do it in their upkeep anyway. Maybe I was supposed to take that. Yeah, I think I messed that up. All right, they hit a couple of thugs. Yeah, that's fine. Kiara's Dismissal as well. Got it. Bowmasters is neat. So let's Swamp Cycle. Get to 4 mana. I think I am interested in playing this land drop still. I'm going to get a second one of these. And the idea is to just scale up with Menace, and then after this turn, I will be able to hold up Bowmasters more safely to stop Bridge from Below nonsense. But given how low my life total is, I think I have to just start scaling up this creature immediately. This also gives me 2 blood tokens for if I need to loot through my stuff. But I can make that decision a little bit later. Only 1 Bridge from Below in graveyard right now. Let's just see how bad this turn gets. That's honestly not that bad. Yeah, so my opponent said, I feel like I'm giving you too much mana, in reference to just like returning my creatures back to play. All right. Ayara's Oathsworn doesn't seem super relevant this game. I think I'm going to loot that away. I have some bigger draws. Like sometimes I just hit a land or something, but like other times I find something like a fairy that gives me a lot of flexibility. Oh my god, it's a fairy. That is exactly what I asked for. Oh shit. Pre-combat Exsanguinator Cavalry. Scale these up 3 times. Have the ability to remove bridges and also have fairy. Don't mind if I do. Send them. Triggers. I'm going to take a picture of that one. That's good. All right, fantastic. So now I'm just going to get rid of Stinkweed. Stinkweed? Let's just take those out before my opponent can like untap and brainstorm in response. And we very easily have more than lethal this turn. Icarid has no friends. That was a neat game of Magic. I don't think I played it optimally, though. Okay, so when I am on the draw, Pithing Needle for Cephalid Coliseum, I think becomes more interesting over like one night. Again, these are probably going to get walled a good portion of the time. And I think I'm going to play like 1 Dismember or 1 Plague Engineer or something just to kind of help out with some of the weird scenarios that might happen. Plague Engineer has some degree of risk associated with it, but it can also do some things like be put on Zombie to just have the amount of power my opponent has in play and kind of adjust some combat math in my favor. All right, did my opponent keep their 7? My opponent has mulliganed. I can absolutely shred my opponent's hand, but I can't touch the graveyard, and I also don't present a threat of my own. I think this hand ends up just losing to whatever my opponent does on their turn 1. So I'm going to mulligan this. This is slightly better than the previous hand, but I still think a 5-card hand with a fairy ends up being better than this. And I don't get that. On 5, I probably have to keep this and like Grief Swamp go back into the deck, and I hope that this is good enough. But definitely hoping my opponent stumbles a little bit. And it's possible my Thoughtseize backfires on me, and I end up putting a Dredger into the graveyard. Now, my opponent doesn't need very many cards in hand to try to do something busted. Here is a looting effect. It gets 2 dredgers into the graveyard. I don't have a fairy. I am going to attempt to Thoughtseize, knowing that sometimes this backfires and puts another dredger or a bridge from below into graveyard. We take a Narcomoeba, and my opponent is currently favored to win. Cabal Therapy hits the yard. No bridge with it yet. We'll see if my opponent fires off Cabal Therapy immediately, or if they're going to try to wait for a bridge. I would try to wait for a bridge, and they agree. One unknown card. I don't think I grief. I think I Ayara's Oathsworn. I think I'm going to want to try to tutor in this game. I think potentially tutoring is better than getting the lifelinker out early. No Icarid to play. There is now a bridge in the graveyard. I'll happily take my 1 in combat. And here is the Cabal Therapy. We'll see what my opponent names. Reanimate is perfectly reasonable. They would not want me to get a Hogak, right? That would be a bit of a disaster. Alright. I think this one kind of plays itself. So the goal is attack this turn, and then attack next turn and tutor, and I can get something like a fairy or an orcish bowmasters to try and turn the tide back in my favor. At this point, opponent will junk Grief. They'll be able to cast a Hogak this turn, which I unfortunately can't do anything about. In good news, my creatures have Menace. In bad news, the Hogak can block because Bridge from Below puts another creature token into play. Pithing Needle not going to do anything this game. A Sudden Edict would be pretty good off a blood token loot. I think we're going to loot away Pithing Needle and try for that. Bowmasters is good. So maybe last turn I needed to just grief to take Bridge from Below out of graveyard to prevent Hogak from getting into play. Yeah, maybe that was a line. What do I do now that we're not there? I think I save grief for later? No. So let's grief pitch Changeling Outcast to take this Bridge from Below from graveyard. And it does have some unfortunate side effects. I'll take a Stinkweed Imp with it. Get rid of this bridge. I'll then play an Ayara's Oathsworn. And I'm going to have to attempt to go wide of my opponent's board. I don't know, maybe I could have mulliganed more aggressively than I did. I was already at 5, though. Alright. Graveyard's relatively light here. Not empty, but relatively light. Do I have Sudden Edicts in or Sheoldred's Edicts in? I do have Sheoldred's Edicts in. That matters a lot. Okay, so the Icarid does not make a lot of progress here. So all these creatures have Menace, so my opponent can only block one of them. I am at 11 life, however. So if I attack with everything, I go to 13, which is like dubious because Icarid. I guess I can Orcish Bowmasters kill Icarid? I think I'm attacking in and hoping that my opponent does not block this. And then I go from there. They figured it out. So I block and kill this token. I gain 2, go to 13. I'll scale up some creatures. Now, I'm going to need to kill an Icarid in my opponent's upkeep so that I don't die. They might return both Icarids here. Getting rid of the Thug. Yeah, so now there's no Dredgers in graveyard. So I will loot. Actually, I should do Bowmasters first around Daze. I know it's in my opponent's deck. The Bowmasters ping an Icarid. Then loot Chrome Mox into a functional card. That's not my ideal, but I'm not dead anymore. I am potentially taking, 10-ish damage, depending on what I block. And the whole goal here is connect with this, kill Hogak with Sheoldred's Edict. Okay. How much? This is 3. So this needs to be blocked. So my opponent blocks with this. Then they could take 3, 4, 5 in combat. If I take this hit, 1 Hogak swing kills me. I think I am just going to accordingly block and not take the damage. Like 8 is the magic number right now. I'm very scared of my opponent just like casting a Narcomoeba. Yeah, same vibe. Thoughtseize is not good. So my opponent can now double block with Stinkweed Zombie token so that I don't get to do my thing. I think I am going to play City of Traders and loot with Blood token without losing life. Thoughtseize is not strong here. Neither is Ancient Tomb, unfortunately. I think I'm now on the defensive. I don't like that. Are we Icariding Icarid? The Icarid's not particularly good on offense because of Exsanguinator Cavalry. I think my opponent's going to attack me for 8 and force the issue. They don't... I don't realistically get to kill them next turn. I only have 8 power in play. Cabal Therapy resolves. They target themselves for Golgari Grave Troll, which is great. All right. They are not attacking. They're going to try to ride this one out for a little while longer. That's a fairy. That's almost good. So I can hit both Grave Trolls here and not attack and kind of keep the situation where it's at. I think I'm into it. I'm going to take out Troll, pass the turn. If my opponent is not going to be the one to start attacking, I think it's okay for me to wait out another turn cycle. My opponent says control mirrors, right? Yeah, this is strange. Oh, that doesn't technically do anything immediately, but it's real weird right now. Because activating that allows me to kill a Stinkweed Imp and create a relatively large body. There's a good chance that my opponent could attack with Hogak, activate Cephalid Coliseum afterwards, sack Hogak to Cabal Therapy, recast Hogak, and end up in a good spot. Things are weird. Reanimate. If I reanimate a Stinkweed Imp, I go to 8. I have a Death Toucher that can stop Hogak. Wow, this is weird. Yeah, I think I'm supposed to chill on this. It's just like awkward because not using black mana matters a lot because black mana is a limited resource on current board, and that's unlikely to change for the rest of this game. Like assuming that this game ends one way or another around turn 12. Stinky comes in. This presumably means that my opponent is going to put some other body into play. Or that they're going to Cabal Therapy sacrifice that. Alright, they target me. Alright, they name Fairy. And now there is a careful study. So they have a Stinkweed to start things off. I was planning on potentially like reanimating that out of their graveyard. Orcish Bowmaster's trigger. There is currently a bridge from below on the stack. Or sorry, in the graveyard. I could ping Bowmasters to get rid of that, but there's a Cephalid Coliseum in play, so I don't think I do that. I think I'm just going to send that at my opponent's life total. And then this happens. Multiple Narcomoebas. Alright, so notably, my opponent replaced their draws with dredges, and this was something that the Cephalid Coliseum wasn't going to do before there was a dredger in graveyard, so now I've lost this opportunity to get rid of the bridges. And they can get rid of my Reanimate, while also returning Hogak to play. My opponent is going to create a large number of blockers here, and that Hogak comes back. If there was another Cabal Therapy in graveyard, or no, there still is another Cabal Therapy in graveyard, so they can sack the Hogak and then do this again. A good day to pie. Oh, that's a good one. Exsanguinator Cavalry. I don't offensively have this game. I don't think I defensively have this game either. I'm not going to math it out, but I think my opponent just gets me here. I think just the double Icarid puts it over the top of my life gain, because I'm effectively at 15 life. Oh, Otherworldly Gaze in response. Oh, I didn't realize how close my opponent was to decking. Like, they are only alive for 2 more turns. I think I'm dead, so I think, like, that question is irrelevant, but... Okay, so they must have mapped it out and realized that I am alive. But I won't be for long. Does this save life? This does not save life. So I am just going to pass the turn here and make my opponent think about what my cards might be. But I imagine they just, right-click, attack all, and I die. Like, this is 20 power, 28, 29, 30, 31, a billion. Yeah, my opponent sends it all. I'm effectively at 15 life. I can block some of this. Just for giggles, let's see how close this actually was. I am at -10 when it is all said and done. That was a fantastic round of Magic. All right, this is round 4. I don't have black mana in this opener, so this one's no good. Okay. I'm gonna keep this. I think I'll keep City. I think once I'm at 4 mana, I should just be good. I don't think this has to be an Ancient Tomb game, because I am unlikely to do a sequence other than Thoughtseize into Bowmasters versus a generic deck in this format. Well, the black decks are out in force. I'm going to lose a Bowmasters, and then presumably I'll just lose a set. Oh, what is that? What? No, hold on. What is this art? All right, that is sick. Say what you will about the Universes Beyond's card. That is sweet art. Thoughtseize, I will take Bowmaster so my opponent can't put additional pressure into play. And now I just have to hope that I can top deck out of a 3-power attacker backed by Force of Will eventually. I don't know when my opponent will be able to play that card. But I do have to stop ripping lands off the top. I also bottomed an Ancient Tomb, so this is a little unfortunate. But I don't have card advantage in this deck. I don't have the... Can I hardcast this? So I get attacked to 9. I Ancient Tomb, I go to 7. Grief attacks me to 3. I could play this. I don't know that it makes sense to, though. I don't think it makes sense to with as few main deck removal spells as I have. I'm going to Sorcery Speed cycle this so I can play another basic Swamp. That is my preference of land drop to play here. It means that if my opponent has a Reanimate as one of their cards, that they produce a Troll, and I lose. But if they had a Reanimate, like, just slamming that on Orcish Bowmasters to just deal 3 more damage is, like, totally reasonable. I'll show this card. It's likely to confuse my opponent, and I am down for that. Like, if my opponent thinks I'm some weird ninjas deck or something like that, I gain a surprising amount by playing this card. If my opponent really has their finger on the pulse of the format, like, they might be able to figure out what this signifies, but I don't know that I would even figure that out had I not have played this deck list specifically. I'm gonna not play City of Traders, because if I top deck a land, I'm just dead to Grief, because this can't block. I'm not going to drop a land. I guess that means maybe I cycle this and just make another Swampland drop. That just feels so bad, though. I also probably don't resolve whatever I play, because my opponent has very, very, very likely drawn a blue card for pairing with this Force of Will. I think I just get 20 to 0'd by Grief. And now an Edict isn't necessarily an out anymore. And if my opponent played that, they certainly have another blue card. Yeah, that is not gonna do it. All 20 by Grief. So I would like essentially as many removal spells as I can board in. So that's 6 cards. And then Fairy is not embarrassing to board in either. The thing about Fairy is that it's not actually good against Grief Reanimate, because your opponent just takes the Fairy with Grief the first time, so it's only good against Reanimate on Trolls. It admittedly can be good against Reanimate on Trolls in both graveyards, which is kind of nice. I am probably least interested in Thoughtseize of my cards. So Thoughtseize gets me the initial 4 removal spells, and then I'm going to play I'm going to play Plague Engineer in respect of Orcish Bowmasters in particular, because I do have some number of X1 creatures in my deck list, including my own copies of Orcish Bowmasters. I think I board out 2 Changeling Outcasts there, and I think further in respect of Orcish Bowmasters, I'm going to play 2 Fairies, but I don't know that I want to cut anything else to go deeper than that. This is pretty mid. I don't think this wins a game of Magic. This is essentially a 6-card hand where I'm all in on a Knight of the Ebon Legion. We're going to say no. This hand doesn't do anything. That is unfortunate. This is also not great. This is a 5-card hand that also plays this as my only threat. Thanks, I hate it. I think we're keeping this, pitching Chrome Mox, hoping to get lucky with land drops. I think I'm going to keep removal spells. But this is bad. Like, this is not what this deck is trying to do. I expect that I will concede in short order. I'm not going to keep the Fairy. Like, if my opponent Grief Reanimate scams me, like, sucks. If they go for a Troll, you know, sucks that I don't keep an answer to it, but I don't have great options here after mulliganing to 5. So, like, I'm jamming Dismember into Daze here in hopes of making my stuff live later on. Oh, hold on. How much is this? Why did they lose 4 or more life? Oh, if a player... Fuck, my Dismembers are so much better than I thought. I'm a genius deck builder. All right, my opponent finds Reanimate. Hit me for 1 more. Hit me for 1 more. Grow my creature. Wait, no, it's at the beginning of my end step. Daggers. So we've missed out on our land drops. So life's bad. There's no targets in graveyard for Reanimate. I don't have the second land drop for Ayara's Oathsworn or Sudden Edict. If I make it through this turn cycle without my opponent playing a second creature and I rip a Swamp, I think we're still in business. Fuck. All right. I'm going to attack directly into an Orcish Bowmasters. All right. That worked. Note, I do not believe that I was supposed to keep the Chrome Mox on a 5-card hand. I think I have to keep enough resources to win the game. Oh, there was an Orcish Bowmasters. It was just not willing to die. They want to attack with it rather than remove my creature. And honestly, that makes sense. Wasteland not doing a lot here. Oh. The Spice. I don't know that I want to board that in versus an opposing Orcish Bowmasters deck. Like, the milling is... I guess the milling is weird for mutually Reanimator decks. Yeah, so I can attack my opponent for 2 and then basically die. Like, I am dead on board. That one did not work out. GG's. Okay. Hand is gonna be a keep. It's a little weird, because, like, the Chrome Mox isn't particularly at its best. I don't think I'm playing this on 1. I might not even... Actually, I could imprint the Knight and play Ayara's Oathsworn on turn 1, and then not have this as a mana sink. No, I don't think I'm going to give up the card here, because I only have 3 pieces of action. Like, I can be more aggressive than just this. I think my plan is to attempt to resolve 2 copies of Orcish Bowmasters in this turn cycle against just Unknown Scalding Tarn. I think that's likely to be very strong. I think that is worth pitching a card. This is a bit of a strange development that changes this turn cycle a lot. So the goal is to get my opponent to crack that fetch land, and then double Bowmasters in response. I don't think they crack right now, though. And I don't want to activate, because then my opponent gets to Lightning Bolt in response, and it's super awkward. I think I don't do anything until their end step. It gives them 1 more draw at a counterspell or other piece of interaction. Ooh. That forces my hand. Looks like we're doing things in end step. So the goal is cast an Orcish Bowmasters, my opponent fetches in response, and then I get to play the second Bowmasters before Daze is live. Yeah, you can wasteland my land. Force of Will. That's a little awkward. Now the second Bowmasters is Dazeable all of a sudden. I think that's fine. I think I'm just going to let that happen, because my mana is now going to be sunk into Night on my turn. So I don't think I wait to play around Daze. And if I force a suboptimal Brainstorm, then this doesn't just immediately get Lightning Bolted. Alright, we did force the action. And there is a Daze. Stack clears, no Brainstorm. Ooh. I think I would rather play this than just pump mana into this. This is worse against Force of Will, but better against most other things, because I get a blood token and I start spreading the threat across 2 bodies rather than 1. We don't know what colors my opponent is for sure yet. They could just be blue-black. Scalding Tarn could be an indication that they are in another color, but it does not have to be. Bowmasters is not actually that good here. Like, it has text. Don't get me wrong. But it does not successfully take these cards out of play. Alright, that's no blocks, at which point I'm perfectly happy just sinking mana into this and losing 2 more life. Like, I take 2, my opponent takes 3, and I'll start stacking up my creatures. This could get a little weird if my opponent is playing Death Shadow specifically. I'm not interested in looting for blood token, and then Night also triggers. Yeah, this synergy package feels pretty good. So we are playing against a blue-black X tempo deck of some kind. So Edict, Plague Engineer, Dismember are actively good. Fairies are kind of a lower tier beyond that I'll probably play some of. Like last round, I am not a fan of Thoughtseize, and I am going to board out some number of X1 creatures to kind of fill out the deck. I think that means I play 2 fairies. I'm going to take one last look over this, see if I want to do anything slightly differently, and I don't think that I do. Okay. I don't have anything cool to do with Grief. So if I keep this hand, it is something like Swamp, from Mox imprint a Grief to play Sudden Edict early, follow up with Hardcast Grief. I am not excited about that. Yeah, I think I'm just missing out on higher ceiling draws if I keep that. Yeah. Reanimate is very actively good in this matchup. I'm going to get rid of Ancient Tomb. Getting rid of Ancient Tomb means that I lose access to some lines, and that I become worse at playing around something like a Spell Pierce. I don't know how much that actually matters. No shuffle on Ponder. Fairy is a 2-power attacker in a few turns. Again, unless things get kind of saucy. So the goal is now to reanimate twice on my turn, assuming that the first one does not end up working. How do we feel about that? Pretty damn good. So let's Grief pitching Fairy and try to clear the way. What's going on over there? Brainstorm's fine. Like, if I put 9 power in play, even if you remove some of that next turn, like, I'm good. I'll be happy. Oh, shit. So, I take Force of Will. What land is currently in play? Polluted Delta. So Fatal Push is on. So I take Force of Will. Then I can reanimate Troll. That sounds good. So I reanimate Troll around days. Troll does not eat Fatal Push. Next, I reanimate my Grief to trade with Days so that my opponent can't just reanimate Grief and take my reanimate for free. So, like, we're good with this. And if we force a fetch, we might be taking some of my opponent's better cards. We did not successfully force that. All right, so Days is gone. I've got a Troll in play. My opponent can reanimate a Grief, but in theory, we'll win that race. So their top card was just an Underground Sea. Or no, sorry, that was what they replayed. JK. Days. All right, so there's the reanimate on Grief. We saw that coming. Ayara's Oathsworn is easily Fatal Pushed. But we're trying to win this game with a 3-turn clock off of Troll. I am still going to trade resource for resource here, as every mana spent dealing with another one of my cards is a mana not spent cantripping towards beating Troll. There are some timelines where my opponent kills this and then reanimates it or something, but that doesn't change the Troll clock. Like, Troll is just coming, and I want to force my opponent to use removal spells to make it harder for an Edict to get this Troll. Right, Chrome Mox is a dead draw. But my opponent has 1 turn to find something to deal with Troll. That is tragic. They found it. I'm going to pass the turn. I'm not going to cycle this. I'm going to hope to draw, like, City of Traders to play it. The issue is that my opponent attacked me for 3. I'm down to 8. They play this end of turn. I then get attacked for 6. So, like, Ancient Tomb is off. And I am on the defensive pretty badly here. Ooh. That gets to name Orc. That's really good. I guess I can also name Knight. Yeah, I would be naming Orc there. Alright. Okay. Well, I get to play this. The issue is that my opponent is still the aggressor. And I can't quite finish the job with something like a Bowmasters to the face. And that's not even a shuffle. So I'm in a, like, Schrodinger's dead situation where if my opponent has another land, they just play it and then play Brazen Borrower, and I'm in a lot of trouble. I think despite how close I am to killing my opponent, I am on the defensive here, and I have to just block in hopes of, like, drawing, like, removal spell into removal spell, and then my opponent has some bricks. It's another petty theft. Good God. Yeah. So this is off. I don't know how I'm going to beat Brazen Borrower. Okay, no, I guess I do. Like, double Brazen Borrower is just horrific here. And a Daze. Fuck me. Absolutely savage. How many Brazen Borrowers is my opponent playing? Like, is it 2 and they just saw both, or do they have more than that? Like, I could go deeper on flying blockers than I have gone. But I don't know that it is correct to do so. I don't like this hand. I just don't have any removal, and I don't think I have enough gas to beat my opponent. I'm going to mulligan. Oh boy, that one's awkward. I think I'm keeping it and hope that my deck gets me out of this situation. I think I'm getting rid of City of Traders, which I think is going to be a very awkward land, just kind of looking at how this goes. Sometimes I get wastelanded and just lose because of it. I don't think I am griefing yet. Well, that's the worst case scenario for throwing back the City of Traders. Still think it's correct too. Like, I think I have to keep removal and threat density. And now my opponent wastelands this. Oh, not yet. Okay. Sure, that's fine. So at this point, I now probably need to grief to stop my opponent from potentially reanimating my own troll. I'm going to do this getting rid of my 3-drop. My mulligan now kind of puts me in a further worse place. 2 reanimates! Fuck me. Oh, I played around something and got absolutely savaged for it. Like, I can still rip a land off the top and then, like, safely Shoulder's Edict that card. Like, it's okay. But it's very frustrating to, like, identify the thing that is going to beat me, call it out, and then my opponent has 2 of them. The worst case scenario here is that my opponent has Orcish Bowmasters, at which point I just right-click and concede. This is also, like, very awkward. I don't want this versus Wasteland, and I have to play it to Edict. Disgusting. Okay. My opponent did not use their mana in their turn cycle. They have Orcish Bowmasters, so I can't use Shoulder's Edict to get rid of Troll. I am going to have to Sudden Edict, which is not the card that I wanted to use. Like, I want to use this one when I can actively play around Daze like I can right now. But, like, I think it's pretty clear that my opponent has Bowmasters and was just playing around Shoulder's Edict, so I can't give them that. Yeah, so they're not wastelanding me to hold up for Bowmasters. So I'm going to play Plague Engineer and put it on Orc. My opponent's got Daze. Cool. Otherwise, like, this maybe makes their last turn cycle or 2 pretty awkward. They could, like, wasteland me and then Fatal Push it or something. They've got options. All right, they do have Daze. I'm a little surprised that I'm being allowed to keep this City of Traders. Okay, yeah, there it goes. Sure. Is it Murktide time? It is. So I fished the Daze out of my opponent's hand. That's the good news. The bad news is I am dead on board if I do not rip a land. And the worst news is that my opponent probably has, or at least potentially has, Orcish Bowmasters that they can just proactively play out to avoid this. Okay, sure, Plague Engineer accomplishes the same goal of making an edict no longer live. But we did not draw another land, and I am dead. Meaning that despite all the agency we had in games, and despite how close some of these were, we do end up in a 1-4 in this league. So where does that leave us regarding this deck and the various knights? I think we have gone a little too deep here, but I don't think we went that deep. Like, this was a deck that had agency and relevant decisions and played decent Magic in all 5 of the rounds. Of the cards that were in this deck list, I would say Changeling Outcast greatly underperformed, as it's only good when you get to line it up with Exsanguinator Cavalry in particular. But Knight was a legacy playable card, as was Ayara's Oathsworn, and we did get to the point where tutoring with this card was a thing that was potentially going to happen, and could happen very quickly when we lined up 2 of these. I think the biggest problem with this deck list is that it doesn't have any sort of card draw, and that it doesn't have any source of... Or sorry, let me rephrase that. And it doesn't have anything else to do with Changeling Outcast. I think if you want to explore this shell, you do kind of maybe want to think about getting rid of City of Traders. There definitely were plenty of hands where the mana was awkward due to the colorless sources. So I think you could consider maybe going down to 2 cities and playing 2 more swamps, or trying an Urza's Saga package, or something like that. It is possible that there is something here, but the question with a deck like this is this better than other similar existing decks? is the juice worth the squeeze with something like a knight-themed deck? And I don't know that the answer is yes, but if you are a player of another format where like this and this are both legal, keep an eye on this because like these are relatively new printings. Maybe you can do something similar to this in another format, and I think that would be pretty darn cool. This was an enjoyable league and something snazzy. I hope this gives you some good things to think about. One thing that we didn't really play against today that I would have been really worried about was some sort of bug beans deck list, where I think that lack of like both Shouldered and some sort of card draw would be really noticeable. I'm blanking on the name of the card, but the enchantment that our opponent played, the Underworld Connections Phyrexian Arena style card that lets you pay life for a 3/2 and a treasure and a card. Underworld Connections? That sounds right. Underworld Connections is like definitely the sort of thing that you could consider for this deck list, but I don't think you can do that unless you also add Urza's Saga into the deck list. And honestly, like Urza's Saga to turn these sorts of things or this into lifelinkers with Shadow Spear is like definitely a thing as well. So yeah, Brewers, this is something that I think would be fun to mess around with. And folks, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you need to pick up any of these cards, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save a little bit on your order. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya!